Okay, well, thank you, Eva, and thank you, everybody, for being here. I'm really honored to be at the A and to be speaking here as someone who's not an architect. Means a lot, of course. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about what Eva's touched upon, the idea of creativity in art, in culture, in design, and also the sense of play and sense of fun and whimsy that I think is needed in order to create creative, immersive experiences. So I'm going to go through a little bit of a presentation, a little bit about me. I've been at Google now for about 8.5 years, and most of my time has been spent working on products, really at the edge of creativity, art, culture, design. And I'm going to speak a little bit about my work, some of the things that I've worked on, but also a little bit about the philosophy behind how it's done and what I think has resonated, and also maybe some of the failures that came along the way. So actually, this is something that we were talking about, the creative lab. So T. Aglo leads the lab in Australia. She's an incredible person. And I actually heard her say this on a talk, on a podcast. And then I spoke to her about it last time she was in London. She's a creative lead, and she said that she considers her role to be that of a gardener rather than a conductor, somebody who's sitting and nurturing and giving time and energy to ideas, to people, to syntheses, to conversations, to cups of coffee, rather than someone who's sitting in front of an orchestra and telling people what to do and making sure that everybody works in unison and according to a particular format. And this really, really resonated with me because I have worked extensively with museums, with curators, artists, the directors of cultural institutions, but also on the other side with technologists, creative coders, people who think in a very different and perhaps more linear fashion. Everybody that I've worked with comes with a completely different timeline, set of priorities, set of deadlines. And often our role is really to sit and to think about how we can nurture ideas, nurture people coming together, and to do it in a way that ends up hopefully with something incredible, a flower coming obviously out at the end of it. But very often, nothing happens. You wait 1 year, you wait 3 years, and then something comes to life. And it's usually completely unrelated to what we had expected to happen. So this is a thought that I kind of have been sitting on the last couple of days as I've been thinking about this conversation. And I hope that it's a conversation. Please feel free to interrupt, raise your hand, and obviously we can talk at the end if you have questions. I'm going to show a lot of videos, and I'm going to try to go quickly. But because we're talking about tea, I wanted to show a clip of this video from a project that is actually was launched at the Sydney Biennial last year. It was also shown at South by Southwest. And I think it's a really beautiful example of a collaboration that is meaningful and obviously uses technology.
This purse is an old purse from my great-grandma.
My mom taught me how to do beading, the one in my hand.
Support.
And
Let's see.
Is it linked on YouTube, right?
Yeah.
YouTube.
Yeah, it's just not showing on the screen. It's that. So I'll talk a little bit about what I'm going to show. So it's actually an augmented reality experience. It was designed in collaboration with artists like Ai Weiwei, with organizations like the UNHCR.
by my mother.
And you'll see a little
this
bit
is
about it.
One of the most precious things in my life. Why?
My name is Amal. I escaped war from South Sudan.
Trận chiến diễn ra vào lúc 4 giờ chiều, khi tiếng súng bắt đầu nổ lên ở trước nhà tôi.
जब मैं ये हार पहनती हूँ, मैं खुद को सुरक्षित समझती हूँ.
أحب هذه المحفظة لأنني أحبها كثيرا جدا.
I'm going to stop there. I have a lot of videos, so I'm not sure how I'm going to manage this changing the screen, so I might need your help. But so the reason I'm showing you this is because it's a very physical experience. You have to be in the room, you have to be there, but obviously it transports you to a different place, a different time, and you have an interactive experience. You can actually point your phone towards a person that you want to speak, and you can hear their story in a way that actually would possibly not happen in any other format. You wouldn't come face to face with any of these people. And it's a really gentle way of using technology, I think, to create that dialogue. I think we're going to have this problem again, but I'm just going to keep going because there's a lot of videos. So what is technology? I think technology for me is really the tool. I think the goal of it is not to be the solution. It's not to be the driver of creativity, but it really often is just a source of creating a little bit of magic, opening up new doors, adding an exponential view on a certain moment, a piece of data, and a problem in a way that wouldn't be possible without it. And really the goal of bringing technology into creative projects is to open up doors in a way that the expert in the room might not have seen or known about before. So excuse the little faces, but really this is like a little bit of what I was thinking. I think, so you have the gardeners at the bottom, and that's how I see us. So that's how I see the Creative Lab at Google. That's how I see Google Arts and Culture, the team that runs it. And then really you build on the work of the experts, curators, architects, scientists. They have the vision, they have the ideas. And for us to push the boundaries of the stories that they want to tell, for us to push the boundaries of who has access to their stories and their work, is really to bring in our tools, to bring in developers, to bring in creative coders, and to bring people in who think in very different ways, who have very different perspectives, where there's often complete tension or often just a block in information, and to see where we can take that to access new audiences. Really, at the end of the day at Google, we think about access. We want everyone to have access to information. We want everyone to see these stories. We don't want things to be limited to people because of their interests or where they come from. And that's really where we think we can really push boundaries and add value. So I'm going to go through a little bit of my work at Google Arts and Culture. I'll tell you a little bit about the platform. How many people know what Google Arts and Culture is, or the Cultural Institute? Okay. So quickly, it's an online platform. It was really founded with the goal of creating access to the world's cultural information online. And at its core, it's a storytelling platform. We work with about 2,000 cultural institutions in 80 countries, and we help to digitize their collections. We take really high-resolution photography. We capture Google Street View in order to bring these experiences to life in a 360-degree format. And increasingly, we're using more complicated technologies, things like photogrammetry, laser scanning, to create immersive experiences. We also have a lab in Paris where we work with a team of creative coders to help to push really the boundaries of where tech and art meet. So using things like artificial intelligence, machine learning as tools, thinking about augmented reality, virtual reality, and really exploring ways in which we can take cultural stories, collections, and the work of artists, designers into a space that probably hasn't existed before. So what I'm going to do is go through a bunch of stories which all have videos. And so I'm just going to, oh, yes. So I'm going to actually stop. So this is a collaboration that we've done with SciArc. We have an architect on our team, an archaeologist on our team, sorry, and his entire role is to look at the idea of the preservation of heritage at risk. So anything from culture under attack from, of course, war, extremist attacks, to environmental degradation, climate change, even tourism. So this is a project which we worked on with SciArc, which I'm sure a few of you are familiar with, where we worked across 25 sites in 18 countries around the world. And this is an ongoing project. It's been about 3 years and it's ongoing. And the goal was really to lend our technologies to document these sites, obviously using things like laser scanning, photogrammetry. But what was unique at the end of it, and which really came about with an ongoing dialogue with SciArc, but also developers in the space, is that all of the data was eventually made open source so that anyone around the world could download it and create their own augmented reality experience, for example, on their phone. So I'll show you the video. I would check it out. I would download the app. And what was actually very moving about this particular project is like right after we captured Bagan, which you saw, the temples with the dots around them, that was the photos taken around the actual temple complex. There was an earthquake and a lot of that was destroyed. And so we have now online a VR experience where you can go through it in an interactive way. And one of the things I will say is that okay, I've lost my slides again, so I'm going to need someone to come. But one of the things that...
Actually, it's very nice because if you just press Command, this, then you just shift it.
Thank you.
So you got Command tab.
Done.
That's my trick.
Thank you. So on this particular sort of experience, one of the things that is very resonant is that you do have these physical places that obviously all of us would want to go to. If we could go to Petra, we'd want to go to Petra. If you could go to the Met, you would. But it is often very difficult for people to make that. And when places are destroyed, there's, you know, this kind of greater divide between what it is, what the world is, and what we want to experience. And so this is one, I think, for us, one of the most important things that we actually do with our work. The next thing I want to talk to you about is a project that we did with a designer, Ez Devlin. She's British. I'm sure some of you know her work. She's known as a theater set designer. She's worked with people like Kanye West and Beyonce and U2 on designing their stages and their concerts. And we ended up working with her with the London Design Festival over a period of 3 years to create a physical experience, which eventually came to life in Trafalgar Square. This project was quite special and unique because we ended up coming up with a concept for this particular project about 2.5 years ago in a partnership with the Serpentine Galleries. We had this playful idea with a creative technologist to use a giant cache of 19th century poetry to create an interactive experience. So anyone could give a word to this AI algorithm and get a poem back. And this idea developed to the point where Ez was walking through Trafalgar Square one night with John Sorrell, who founded the London Design Festival, and she said, you know, there's these 4 lions, they've been here for 150 years, what if they could talk, what would they say? And so we ended up bringing that poetic discourse to Trafalgar Square for anyone from the public to come and to say, there's a 5th lion now in Trafalgar Square, give it a word, give it the word that you would want it to say if it could speak, and get a poem back and have this kind of amazing conversation. Anyone could access this. You could just put in a word online via the London Design Festival app, and it ended up being this really unique interactive experience. It's an artistic piece. It doesn't have, you know, resonance beyond or above that, but it used machine learning in a unique way.
Monster.
Reason. Nelson.
Gratitude. Orange. Reconciliation.
Did any of you see it? Yeah. Okay, let's see this, the control tab trick.
Command tab.
Command tab. Okay, I think I need to escape. Not working. Maybe I need you here.
No, this one.
Oh, that one. Okay, got it. I think I've got it now for the rest of time. Okay, so the next one. Wayne McGregor, any of you familiar with his work? So he's a choreographer. He's a resident choreographer at the Royal Opera House. He also runs his own studio, Studio Wayne McGregor. And he has been working with us again for many years. We actually started off looking at his archive and saying, how can we document 25 years of your career? Take the photos, take videos, and take the stories of your career and bring it online and share it with audiences to know what you represent as a choreographer, as an artist. But Wayne doesn't sort of settle for just storytelling. And so he was pushing the idea for a long time of what we could take forward with his archive. And we ended up with this idea for what we called a living archive. We looked at all of the videos from the 25 years of his career, and we ended up creating a machine learning Experiment, which has ended up being a tool which he's been using for choreography. So we've analyzed thousands and thousands of hours of video from his past performances and created a tool which he can use and which his dancers can interact with in order to create basically predictive text for dancing. And not only does it look at his past choreography, it also looks at the individual dancers, their movements, their style, their bodies, and gives them individual cues for how to interact with the tool. So there's more to come on this, but we had the first performance in LA in July. And I'll show you a bit of this.
One of the things that's run through all of my practice has been a relationship with technology. I'm fascinated in how AI might actually develop the conversation around what is choreography, who has to make choreography, what are the potentials of choreography. And I guess that's how we started to work with Google.
At the Google Arts and Culture Lab, we bring artists, curators, together with engineers and creative technologists to experiment at the intersection of art and technology.
Hi, I'm Bastien. I'm a creative coder here at the lab. I've been involved in the machine learning and the interface as well.
So when we started working with Wayne, we were really interested about movement prediction. We found a research paper which was about handwriting prediction, and we think, what if we use that for predicting dance movement? We use the archive from Wayne to train the algorithm so they can use this data to generate movement.
When I'm working with dancers normally, what I'm asking them to do through their own creativity is make iterative versions of an idea that I might have proposed. What this tool does for each little moment is do 400,000 iterations of that, yeah? So the canvas is way, way bigger. We had to gift the archive, and it was a huge archive, you know, it's thousands of hours of video to be analyzed. What this tool allows us to do is go, okay, I'm starting with this phrase. I would like the machine learning tool, the AI, to invent the next phrase, but in the style of Jordan, or in the style of Jess. And then you can get combinations of those. And then it's learning all the time and feeding back. And so this iterative version gives you all of these new possibilities you couldn't have imagined.
But so there is, this is very unique. This is something we've never done before. We've never thought of dance in this way, and we've never thought of movement in this way, and nothing like this has actually been creative. But this is a great example of somebody like Wayne coming and forcing us to push our boundaries and forcing us to think in a way that we would never have thought of. We don't think about dancers and their bodies and how they move. It would never have occurred to us that AI could create a new form of dance for someone like Wayne. But what I think is really beautiful about this one is that it leaves room for interpretation. It's obviously the way that he does choreography, but the dancers take it and make it their own. And there's something quite beautiful about the dialogue between the machine and the human in this particular example. And I think that's going to probably manifest a little bit more and more with creativity, with arts, and with culture as we start to see kind of this melding of what technology can do to support and to hopefully grow and embellish practice without obviously changing the vision of whatever the practitioner or artist is. This is an architecture project, very specific. So this actually originated, the idea came from the Serpentine Galleries. As an institution, they work very well with us. I think one of the reasons is they're not a traditional museum. They don't have a collection. So they're constantly trying to push their own boundaries and to think a bit differently and to create experiences that haven't been created before. This is the first year that they wanted to create an augmented reality pavilion. So pavilion that sat on a device and that wasn't in the physical space. So we worked very closely with David Ajay, who's on the board of the Serpentine, to put out an open call for artists and architects around the world to submit an idea for an AR pavilion. And Jakob Steensen ended up winning the prize as an artist. And I'll show you the video. We had a judging committee that included everyone from Virgil Abloh to David Ajay to people from Google, obviously Hans Ulrich Obrist. So it was a very unique way of looking at, for us especially, what is architecture? For us to allow it to be defined in a way that we were nervous to do, to be honest, before, and to have an artist come in, he's not an architect, to create this. It's a physical experience. You actually have to go to Hyde Park in order to have the experience. So it is very interactive with the elements of the park, and yet it doesn't exist in a physical form. So.
The Deep Listener is a response to an open call called Augmented Architecture by the Serpentine Galleries through a collaboration with Google Arts and Culture. It's an application on your phone that you can download, and it allows you to listen to species in the park through AR as you walk through it in ways that you otherwise can't hear. On this trail, you're encountering 5 different locations, and each location have different iconic species in the park. One is the plane tree, one are bats, one are reeds, parakeets, and azure blue damselflies. The most interesting one, I think, is the London plane tree, and they were crossbred to create this bark that's very strong at absorbing pollutants in the air. These parrots in Hyde Park, the parakeets, were probably escaped from captivity in the 90s. There are many different stories of where these parrots come from, but now they're all over the park, and they have these very strong bird calls.
There have been many different projects in collaboration with the Google Cultural Institute, and this, of course, is the first time that we're going into the park. I think it's wonderful to see here how Jakob Kurt-Stinson really shows us such a poetic potential within an experience with augmented reality.
When you arrive at a location in a Deep Listener, you're then moving through 30 meters of different audio layers, and the different layers have different depth of listening. Like you can listen to the deep earth breathing of a tree, or the roots and the bark or the wind.
Architecture has the potential to tell incredible stories about our world and our times. Deep Listener talks about not just understanding the plant life, the species, the ecology, pollution, our fragility on the planet, but also brings us into deep narratives about roots, about the kind of meaning and evolution of biologies and forms that are around us. It's very exciting.
So I'm going to stop there. So one of the questions I think many of you may have, I've had this, is what does it mean to experience something like that on your phone? So that's a big screen, it's beautiful, you hear the sound. When you're in the park and it's around you and then you just have your phone and this thing, there is a disconnect. And I think it's something to think about. This is beautiful and immersive, and it is its own thing, but it's a new form, I think, of thinking about what is architecture, what is experience, where are we, how do you place yourself? And I think we also found that quite difficult to think through is, where is the line between an artwork and a piece of technology that you're experiencing? So I don't know if it's actually still up, but like if you have the chance, I think I would recommend that you go. So, Vermeer. This actually is another project we did with a team of architects. We ended up getting, there's I think 34 known artworks by Vermeer, and we ended up digitizing all of them in high resolution. It just felt like too special of a collection to just put online and list with the names of the artworks and letting people zoom into them. And so we ended up working to create what you see on the left, which is a building, which you can project with your phone onto the floor, and then step inside and walk through using your phone in augmented reality. The goal of this was to try something new, of course, and also to honor the fact that you'll never see these 34 artworks in the same place. In fact, I believe one of them went missing after this. And so there is this experience that you probably will never have. It is a museum experience, and it's actually kind of thrilling to do it because you go into this building and you can see kind of the ceiling. So the ceiling of that is, you would see the building here of this room as you look through it. We've developed another one since then on color, where we've just curated our collection by color. So there's 7 million artworks on our platform now. Each of those comes from a cultural institution around the world. All of them have complete museum-level quality metadata, but there's never a way of seeing everything at once. So this was a way of thinking a little bit out of the box, of allowing people to see something in a way that felt like there was scale. And the artworks, when you see them, you know, download the app, will show scale. And then this is actually the final thing I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you very quickly. Everyone knows Paul Smith, the fashion designer. So he loves color. He's inspired by paintings, by color. We've worked with him quite a bit over the years in thinking about craftsmanship and celebrating British fashion and design. And we thought we'd do something quite fun with him. So we think a lot in terms of data, how paintings are tagged, how museums would describe them. But what about what probably most of you creative people think about when you look at an artwork is the feeling you have when you're looking at it. And he loves the idea of color. So we actually applied machine learning to all of the 7 million artworks to allow anyone to maybe take a picture of, I don't know, your red trousers, upload it onto the platform and get back all of the artworks on the platform that match the color palette of that image. So I'll show you a little bit quickly, since I might not be describing it completely articulately, so you can see a little bit of what the tool is like.
You can find inspiration in anything. My dad was really helpful to me because when I was 11, he bought me my first camera, a Kodak Retinette. 36 exposures were very, very precious, so you had to really think about the picture. And I think I just trained my eyes to look and see. I find that weaving around on the bike really, really works because you've got the opportunity to stop really quickly, take a picture. If you can train your mind just to look and see, you'll find things anywhere. The thing about Art Palette, for somebody who loves colour, like me, it's just so useful to look through a whole collection of paintings or photography or anything where people have used certain colours together. I can't believe the enormous selection of artwork which is available, and that's really helpful. I use colour mostly as a punctuation mark. The art of colour was really essential for me because I was designing clothes which is so simple that you needed the surprise and you needed the colour. Henry Matisse was another person who worked a lot in colour. And he was absolutely genius at putting colours together. So you put blue and white together and they look fresh. You put orange and red together, they fight. My approach is, I saw a great painting and I just love the colours in it. So I just took the colours and then that became this one, which we call the artist stripe. And that came just by looking at a painting at the Tate Modern. As a fashion designer, Art Palette can help me working with my staff. So what we'd probably do is start off with the colours that I've selected for that season, and then through the app, just look at those colours and then see what gets thrown up. That can be so influent on how we design. The thing is about finding inspiration in the world today is looking and seeing. It's all there if you want it. You've just got to train your eyes to see it.
That's the link, g.co/artpalette. For those of you who don't know, Paul Smith also has like a massive collection of just things, just objects, and that's one of the things that set us off. So you see it in the room behind him, just millions of things that inspire him. Okay, is everyone still with me? Should I keep going? Okay, because I saw people speak for an hour and a half at a time, and I do not want to be that person. Okay, I'll keep going. So I'm going to talk very briefly about impact. So we've talked about art, culture, creativity from that perspective, museums, but what about impact? So obviously, Google is a massive company and has over the years deployed its technologies to do many different things. One of the things I'm very interested in right now and getting involved with is the sustainability work that we do. And it's actually incredible to think about the platforms that are available and the scale of impact that is possible. So I'm going to just walk you through a couple of examples. The first one is a project we announced in July this year at the Copenhagen Fashion Summit. We're working with Stella McCartney and creating a tool on the cloud, Google Cloud, which will hopefully allow for any fashion designer anywhere in the world to go online and to be able to map both their carbon emissions footprint as well as the wastewater creation based on their choices. So what we're envisioning is some sort of map which will be really applicable to anywhere in the world. And we're starting off with 2 fabrics, cotton and viscose. So right now fashion accounts for about 20% of wastewater creation around the world and 10% of carbon emissions. It's massive. Cotton is the most widely used fabric. Cotton fibers are in about 25% of all garments, and viscose is following but growing quickly. So those are the 2 materials that we've chosen. And our goal is to really create a database that anyone can access that will allow people to be able to track, if they can figure out where their raw materials are coming from, to really measure the impact and to think about how they're sourcing and making responsible choices, and if they're, if they can also help the communities that they're sourcing from eventually, if they can afford to do so, to improve their practices and to operate in a way that's more sustainable. This project was actually inspired by Global Forest Watch, which is one of my favorite projects ever that Google has done, and it was actually launched in 2014. So it uses the Google Earth Engine, which was founded in about 2010. Does anyone know what Google Earth Engine is? Okay, so just for those who don't, it's a massive database of everything related to our planet. Things like forest density, flooding, water levels, disease, natural disaster. It allows you to go anywhere in the world and track using Google Earth the levels and the impact of each of these metrics online with data that's regularly updated from sources that are vetted by the Earth Engine team from around the world. So Forest Watch was actually launched basically to look at the world's forests. And I actually wrote it down here because I thought it was so incredible. I think it used a network, the Earth Engine used a network of cloud-based servers to process 650,000 images across 10,000 computers working in parallel in order to create the global forest map. It would have taken a solo computer 15 years to do the job. So it's just an incredible piece of engineering and computing that probably at the time no other platform could have done, and it's now used by organizations around the world in order to track all kinds of things, obviously sourcing of raw materials, but also all kinds of governments, NGOs, and regular people to see the state of our world and what's happening with it. So I just recommend checking it out. I think it's really special, and it has been the inspiration for what we're doing now with fashion and sustainability. I won't show you this video since most of you knew what it was. Another thing I'll just show you quickly is the time lapse. So this is really beautiful. I would check it out. This, you could go anywhere in the world and look at the last 35 years by metrics. So you could look at it literally by water levels, by forestation, desertification, and the numbers are just mind-boggling. 15 million satellite images to create these maps over 35 years of history. So the reason I actually wanted to show you this is that it's not Google. Google provides the technology and the computing power, but the images actually are from NASA satellites, and they hadn't been available for like 30 years before the Earth Engine was created. And this was an incredible way of taking those images and bringing them online and allowing them to be useful in a different way. There's multiple partners that come from very different parts of the world that are working on these things and that become the advisors and that become the drivers for what these products eventually are. And in this case, of course, it's also the US Geological Survey, the European Sentinel programs that are constantly mapping. And this data is updated, I think, every 15 to 16 days, which is unbelievable. So again, I think an example of course, it's creative. It's actually so beautiful. The time lapse, you could just look at all of these forever, but it comes over time, it comes with partnerships, and it really comes with institutions with very different perspectives coming together. So the last thing I will just throw up there is, I don't know if any of you have heard of this program, but it's run by google.org, Artificial Intelligence for Social Good. So this is an ongoing challenge. Anyone around the world is welcome to apply. And of course, artificial intelligence as a tool can be used for a million different things, but everyone can't think of all of the solutions and the problems. The problems will always come from experts. The solutions, likewise, will come from conversation and collaboration. So this is another example, still quite small, of thinking about opening up the doors to other people's ideas. You know, what can AI do? What do you want AI to do, even if you don't really know what's possible? It's the same question we throw out to artists. We have a machine learning residency program where we say, you might not ever have used machine learning before, but if you have an idea that involves data, that involves creativity, and you want to come to us, our coders can actually work with you and think about what's possible and how. So that's basically it. I mean, I think that I want to come back to the idea of gardening. I love it. I love the idea of just thinking about being patient and being still. It's something that I don't do, none of us do enough. And sitting on ideas, sitting on a cup of coffee and finding space and time and clearing your head a little bit to really think about not what you might want, but what might be possible. Thank you.
I love that you start with gardening and you finish with gardening, and no one can find kind of like, you know, the bud with flowers is always a kind of a smooth, almost innocent way. But maybe one of the most interesting things, and maybe before we even open it up to the questions in the floor, is what have been some of the most difficult conversations in terms of data, in terms of the kind of politics associated with Google, with some of its practices, the energy consumption of its computation engines, and understanding the kind of political correctness that we all need to have, and that you're speaking also in behalf and you're part of the company. 3 weeks ago we had Liz Diller giving here a lecture talking about also the difficult moments, no? The difficult conversations. Because I mean, I was downloading, and I've been a big Google fan of my entire life, because I like to think that they think in many ways in the way in which some of these algorithms work. But I'm very actually interested in what are the difficult moments, the spaces of resistance, the criticism within the Google cultural data project, and you are encountering, and if you can share any of those with us.
Yeah, for sure. So I can say very openly that often, you know, things have changed and evolved, and museums in particular are now much more open to sharing. They see the value in, you know, not having all of their artworks have watermarks or, you know, faces in the way when they're online. The highest resolution image of most of these artworks is now online because they were open to it. So there has been an evolution. There is an understanding, of course, that at the end of the day, you're protecting your assets. You know, the artworks for a museum are really their assets and their wealth, and opening it up is, I think, for good reason, quite scary. And not only has thinking evolved, of course, circumstances have evolved with everyone having a phone and being able to take a photo in a museum and uploading it. So taking ownership back, I think, has been a big part of it. So if you search for Starry Night online, you'll actually see in the knowledge panel on the right, the MoMA's image of the Starry Night, which is the highest resolution version of that image, but the full description of the artwork from the curator at the MoMA. And then you can click on a button and go into the MoMA. So it's also handing back control and power, I think, in an online space, because we all operate now on multiple platforms, back to these institutions. When we take photography of these artworks, the copyright belongs to the museum and the cultural institution. But there will always be concerns. The other concern I've encountered as curator is being worried about us creating a funny, you know, a fun, humorous YouTube video with the curator and putting them with a couple of YouTube influencers from LA. And suddenly you're throwing them off, and the director is worried, and you've changed the narrative of their entire messaging. And we're pushing boundaries. And then there'll always be a point where there's tension. And I've also learned myself personally to develop that respect and to understand, you know, if somebody has been working on medieval manuscripts for their entire career, I have no right to tell them, really, at the end of the day, how they should be represented online. I can only give them ideas, throw inspiration their way, but it is theirs, their journey to go on and their story to tell at the end of the day. So that happens constantly. And it's not always easy, and sometimes we drop things entirely. We've dropped entire projects, and that's why things also take time, because you're trying to find space with each other, especially when each institution in each project is different. I think that, you know, on the bigger story of, like, you know, when we think about things like sustainability and carbon, I think that, you know, Google has done a lot now to really be completely sustainable, data neutral, carbon neutral. as an organization, and work is still ongoing, but I don't think, anyone in the world has figured out a solution, and I think that's an ongoing journey, and I think criticism and conversation are always important, both outside and inside, because if you don't have those conversations, you don't make progress, and you also don't make change.
Opening it up to questions in the room.
I'm not an architect, but I'm really interested.
Sorry, do you mind?
Yes, I shall throw mine over.
You can sit down.
I'll sit down.
I'm not an architect, but I'm well aware I'm in the Architecture Association. I'm really interested, to anyone who is an architect in the room, what opportunities and possibilities attract them most to what technology and potentially Google can offer them that haven't been explored yet.
I found you have two architects, maybe they have some ideas. Sorry, I took the 7 o'clock flight in the morning.
Yeah, well, anyhow, but I guess, the question is how to pitch a project to Google is for me the big question, and there were some invitations during your talk. But yeah, I have ideas and I would like to discuss them after, but yeah, I think unless I have never found an invitation for Google to submit a project right now. Today I'm happy I learned that there is open invitation.
Yeah, I guess it's hard. So there's probably one way of tracking all of that stuff, because there's so much going on and there's so much noise, obviously. I would say from the arts and culture team, we work with any cultural institution anywhere in the world. So if your project is through the Architecture Association, for example, that's an open conversation that we're always happy to have. For these sorts of projects, these challenges, it's obviously email me now, but I would say just follow on social media, because you'll see stuff going up, but I totally agree there's just so much information out there. It's really hard to keep track of when these opportunities come up, for sure. Yeah.
But maybe you could share a bit about what is your cultural process? Like, how do you select a project? How does it come about?
So we would literally work with any cultural institution anywhere, and we really push boundaries in terms of how to capture. We got Street View from Kabul up last year with a collaboration with the Turquoise Mountain Foundation, which was something that took a very long time to manifest. We have, literally, we've just today launched a project in Kenya. We're looking a lot more at Southeast Asia, Africa. We want this to be non-Western centric, but the goal is that any cultural institution that comes to us is welcome to work with us. And as a baseline, we provide digitization, the Street View, and I think a little bit of the point that I was trying to make is the things that go a bit further, the creative projects that push the boundaries beyond just that, that's what always takes time and conversation. And there's never a blueprint and hey, I have this idea, let's do it. It's much more something that I think evolves in a way that's quite organic. And it might not be the most efficient way, it might not be the most scalable way, but it's the way that we found works in order to have things that resonate, stand alone, and not part of just a collective of many.
There's a question on the other.
I think.
I have a few questions, actually. I was writing down quite a lot of notes. But first, just to answer the question before about the architect, in a way, as being here. I'm studying here, and just as a very brief comment, when you say start gardening, I did a brief last year about gardening, and I feel the image you chose is kind of the harvesting part of gardening, and it's the cotton, so the very kind of water intensive, so I feel it has quite meaningful connotation about harvesting, about data, about quite a lot of things. The first question was quite blunt, but is there such thing as free lunch in general? Like, by this I mean, it seems that this Google art is the nice part of Google, let's say, the charity side, or people kind of doing art projects or cultural projects, but we all know about Google's human rights, censorship, data breach, hate speech, energy consumption, and so on. So, yeah, I was wondering what's your stance, or what's your ethical stance on that? Sorry. The second question was, I was reading the UNESCO kind of heritage shortlist, so I was wondering how you go through your shortlist when you 3D scan or photogram your places. Okay, and the third question was kind of, what is, on a more maybe philosophical side, this idea of art infrastructure used as, I don't know if gentrification or virtual colonialism, or how could you kind of, respond to this somehow?
Right. So the first question. So on the first question, yes, arts and culture is not charity. It's actually, we're a not-for-profit team, but we're an engineering team, and we're part of Google Search. So we actually think that bringing higher quality content to the internet from the cultural space serves a value to everybody's search results everywhere. And we also know that cultural institutions are not-for-profits and don't necessarily have the resources to do that. So it really is part of that goal of, yes, it makes search better, it makes it higher quality, it makes the images that surface for you and our users better, and that matters to us as a search company, for sure. And that's something that we're going to continue to build on. In terms of what else it provides, I think we also benefit from these partnerships, from these conversations. We never get to push technologies in the ways that we do with artists, with curators, with people who are coming from a very different perspective. So it actually helps us to think about technologies in a very different way. And because things are constantly changing, it allows us to have these brief conversations, which we call experiments, in a way that we wouldn't be able to do if we were just thinking about building products all the time. So I guess that would answer high level your first question. It is free, it is not for profit. We don't work with commercial institutions, and we don't monetize the platform at all. And that's because we don't want to isolate cultural partners who wouldn't be willing to share their data with us otherwise. And there's a very clear reason for that. What's your second question? I should have got a pen.
I think it was about the art infrastructure.
Yeah, so actually, ironically, we think of this as open access, right? We're opening up access to culture from around the world. So less about shutting down doors, but actually allowing for people to walk inside, to walk down the halls of the Tate or the National Gallery. Of course, these are institutions that have existed for many years. By opening up those doors, we feel like we'll be allowing a conversation between them and people who might actually live in London but be intimidated to go inside, frankly. And a lot of the content that we create, the tone of it is actually very different from what you'd see as a tone on their museum website or catalog. We definitely strive to make it accessible, to make it open, and to shift the dynamics of how you perceive it. And as I was saying earlier, it's not just the big museums. Anyone can work with us. We did a project on fashion a few years ago. We worked with everyone from the British Fashion Council and the V&A and the MoMA and the Met, but also a tiny sari collective in India, a street fashion institution from Tokyo. And so actually we strive to allow these institutions to sit side by side and to tell the story of textile, fabric, movement, whatever it is, in a way that they wouldn't do in a regular way, and to allow those voices to come up, hopefully, in a way that isn't going to change the entire industry, but allows for a conversation that is possible in the virtual space. Last question, what was it?
This idea of monopoly, like how do you deal with the fact that you go and collect all this data, but you're still under a big one engine or a big umbrella, basically?
What does that mean? What's the...
So that you are, in a way, a company that will own all this 3D.
Yeah, so we don't own it. All of the institutions own it. So we actually, the truth is we think of ourselves as a platform, and we think of technology, like I said, as a tool. At the end of the day, the experts are the museums, the cultural institutions. They tell their stories, they write out the words, they give us the images, they tell us what to capture, and they take you through the journey. So although, it seems like it's all hosted on one platform, we're developing the technologies that are evolving, but it's very much their voice. And at the end of the day, anyone who wants to take stuff down can take it down anytime. The reason it's cotton is because I've been thinking about cotton a lot in that picture. I've been thinking about how much water cotton uses, and I think that that's a direction that we're going in, is thinking a bit more deeply about things that of course appear very beautiful but hold so much more behind them.
I actually want to continue pretty much from that question. So the things you presented are all quite interesting projects or quite beautiful, but they're quite equalized because of the way they're presented as well and accessible as well to the public. So this kind of common canvas, which all of a sudden makes everything of the same value or commercial kind of access. Mm-hmm. That's the first question for me. How do you see that in a way? Because this, you know, a lot of people in the videos we know how they usually speak, and then they come across almost like a little advertisement. Or as well, the artwork as well itself is accessed almost like a product rather than actually in its actual content and connectivity. So this kind of misplacement or replacement, depending on the point of view, how you would see that. And just to follow that up a little bit as well into the same direction as before, obviously this is kind of a philanthropic kind of exercise for Google. So you said you don't work with corporates, but obviously you are one of the biggest corporate actually in the world. So that's a personal question to you as an individual, not as a company, like how you see this position as philanthropy, like donating money rather than actually paying the fair share in different societies actually whilst being there through taxes and things like that. So these things could grow bottom up rather than being commissioned by Google as a big corporation. So 2 questions.
Right. So in terms of, I would encourage you to download the app or to go online and actually read, because I do think that, like, yes, I've shown you lots of videos because we didn't have time, and so if you think they're all coming across in a similar vein, it's because, of course, there's a particular color and whatever branding, but really the point of it is to delve into the stories and the content and to think about, you know, how unique each institution is and what's coming across. The other thing that I think is really important to think about is that this isn't the only way you can access any of these institutions or people, for sure. You can go to the Serpentine's website, you can check out the National Gallery social media account, you can also go. And so it's not meant to be representative to everyone in the world of what any one particular institution is. And that's not at all the point of it. And so if there is a particular kind of energy coming across, it's not meant to be the only representation of it. To your second question, I think that all of the ways that we can use technology to bring to the arts and to the cultural space and to projects that celebrate sustainability are important. Like I said, I don't think that's the only way to do it. And I think that this is a way that we are being able to create a platform that anyone can access to use if they choose to, and of course not use if they choose not to. Our investment is in the technology of it. That's what we know. That's how we work. And that's something that we've worked over many years. It's been 7 years now of working with institutions to provide, you know, by choice, a platform which they can choose to engage with or not. And I think that from our perspective, it's not charity, it's really allowing one more tool for them to engage with should they want to do so. And we don't see it as, in fact, all of our projects are partnerships. It's not a sponsorship, it's not a funding, it's very much a collaboration. And you know, since you know these people, you talk to any of them, they would really tell you about the process of conversation that goes into each of these initiatives.
I have an observation and a question maybe at the end. I'm one of the founding team of Biennale in India and South India in Kochi, and the Kochi Musris Biennale, and in 2010 or 11 with your former colleagues, in fact, before you joined Google Art and Culture, we were in a 2-year dialogue to get them to come and capture the Biennale, because we felt that it was important that audiences around the world could experience this art event that was happening, which we were non-profit. And it took a long time, and we were the first biennial in the world that Google Art and Culture came and they sent their cameras to, and it took a year after that, and it launched a year later, and you can still go on Google's website and walk through the biennial, which is really a great asset to this little nonprofit that kind of needed to kind of share this information. But I wanted to just pick up on what you said, and I think that also what this gentleman said about the kind of seemingly altruistic nature of this, and you know, being that it is the largest company in the world and so on. And so part of the you know, it's a search and advertising company essentially, and I guess part of the function of Maps and Gmail and all these other great things that you're doing come out of the profits from search and advertising, and then go into all these great things that we use, like Maps and Gmail, all for free. So there's a free lunch. And I suppose that the art and culture aspect of what you do is a sort of continuation of that, which is that you're investing into areas to make the, organize the world's information and so on, but it's not free. And there is a price. And so the question I'll end with, I mean, I just want to, because I think that I wanted to sort of just give a balanced observation to say that we're an organization that approached Google. We're extremely lucky to be able to work with you. We've done lots of work with you over the last 10 years. I'm sure millions and millions of people have experienced this art festival in Kerala because of Google Art and Culture. But we also realize that it's not completely altruistic, but we're extremely grateful, and I think it's really complicated. Because I think if you use Gmail and if you use Maps, then this is just another one of your products, as it were. But a question to finish would be that, would you advocate, or do you see a future where some of these assets, as you've called them, the monetization of the viewership of these assets would somehow feed back into some of these smaller organizations? So let's say, if you've had 1 million page views of a reconstruction site somewhere, where they don't have funds to fix it, and maybe some of those funds, I don't know how you would compute it, but could perhaps filter back into these organizations.
Right, so just to make the point again, we don't monetize the platform. So there's no advertising. And so there's no way of us tracking that, because we don't actually make money off of the arts and culture platform. So, just to your specific question, and in terms of how we see ourselves, so I'm not here to speak on behalf of every single product area, but I will say that it is separate and it's not monetized. And what we provide is really, like I said, tools and technologies and time and partnership that help to elevate these stories really with an optimistic view on what we can do to showcase things. And I do think kind of conflating doesn't necessarily help the story of what it means to be able to do that.
We have one more question from our...
Can we have someone new?
Yes.
Welcome to the AA. I was kind of expecting a bit of that, and I've got 2 very, very close friends that work for Creative Labs, one of them you know. And yeah, they have moral conflictions about working for this massive organization. And one of them is the nicest, most moral person I know. And the truth is, with massive reach, you have a bit more of an audience to talk to. So for me, that idea of accessibility can actually be beneficial. And I understand skepticism, but also this isn't Google here, standing here, shouting at you. This is someone who works for Google. And people that work in these institutions don't necessarily completely reflect all of those bad things that those companies have done in the past. So I just kind of wanted to kind of apologize, not on behalf of other people, but yeah, on behalf of other people. Because
I'm glad that other questions have been raised in people's minds. I just think that maybe they missed some of the things I was trying to say.
No, I mean, there's also a part of me that hates Google deeply, but you're not Google, and I'm not going to make you feel uncomfortable. Thank you for coming here, basically.
Thank you.
And yeah, I think there's one thing I'd like to say is that I think if there was a way of making the AA's archive seen by more people in a deep way, why wouldn't we want that? Google's going to be there whether we like it or not, I think. So yeah, it's complicated, I admit, but let's be nice about it. That's it, really. Not much of a question, actually.
Yeah, we'd love to work with AA. We'd love to do that.
Yeah, after this.
I have a question on awareness. How do people discover the platform or learn about it, and are there marketing efforts to kind of broaden its appeal?
Yeah, so the biggest way I think that you'd end up finding it is if you search online for one of these institutions, and it'll always pop up in the knowledge panel as something that you could access to learn more about their collection. Also social media, the Google homepage, if there's a Google Doodle, we often link it back to a story or an artifact that is related to that, the doodle or an anniversary. There'll be a link on the Google homepage. And then of course our partners. So through the institutions that we work with, we really work to push out the stories that we've worked on with them. So that's kind of, I think, the biggest sources of traffic. And then you, of course, have PR and all sorts of other things. Yes.
One more question.
It's slightly off topic, but I was really intrigued by what happens inside. We've spoken a lot about the audiences, but what about the teams inside? So you said that sometimes these collaborations with creatives spark surprises and new things, which then feed back and enrich the engineers. So Google's huge. Does that happen a lot? How does that happen? Can you talk
Yeah,
about
so
that?
it does happen a lot, and it ends up being actually like a lot of like relationship building and person-to-person conversations where you will have, the curator coming to our lab in Paris and sitting with our team of creative coders and having a conversation that sometimes goes on for a few months and really brainstorming on where each party is coming from in order to kind of come up with something different. So with Wayne, for example, he did spend a lot of time kind of going through his own archive and saying, well, this is kind of what I want, and then working with our team of coders to see what was possible, but also they then went off and had a few other ideas and played around and did a bit of coding on the side to come up with things that maybe added to the conversation that they were having. So it's a very ongoing dialogue.
Does that then trickle all the way through to the people who are sort of coding Gmail?
Not necessarily, because it's a big company, as I was trying to say earlier. But in theory, they will see the final product, and it does often happen that somebody gets interested in being involved for whatever reason with a particular creative. So you'll see very often, we work, our creative lab teams, for example, end up working with museums and artists. So there is often quite a lot of crossover. It's not just one team that works on art and culture. In fact, there's multiple teams that have these relationships and that go down particular paths, and often that's because relationships exist. And somebody kind of, gets struck by the idea that they want to work with machine learning, and they are, a designer, and end up meeting another team at Google, and that becomes its own story and collaboration. A lot of it is serendipity, to be honest, because it's such a big, it's a massive organization, and there's things that just kind of come up over time, and a lot of it is, the topical area. So Stella McCartney, of course, is a, represents contemporary British heritage and fashion, but because of her interest in her work in sustainability, has become a partner for this very different project. So that's a little bit of how it works. It's a lot more, I wouldn't use the word chaotic, but unexpected than you might imagine it to be quite often.
I know there are more questions, but this is why we always have a reception after each lecture. So I will invite you to ask the question when we actually stand up. But I loved, I forgot your name, what was your name? Shreto. I loved his proposal, like this moment in which suddenly you're like, wait, what if we suddenly take over, and we make imminent domain of Google, and suddenly we're able to make all the different parts of the companies like something that ultimately produces this kind of do-goodness that the Google Cultural Project seems to be, right? And the way in which you talk, the way in which you express yourself, the way in which you disseminate information. And I think those are very interesting moments and spaces of reflection in which we try to reimagine that, to reconfigure the world anew. And probably, while I always like to think that I'm someone who likes to resist and to be in the side of the agitator, and I started, my question was like warming up for what was in a certain way to come. I'm also always a big fan of those spaces that even when they become institutionalized, they still behave and they still try to find those spaces of resistance and those spaces of difference and those spaces of innovation, even if that is a term that obviously carries many problematic implications. you were talking about the doodle at some point, and I remember once I was in San Francisco in a bar. I just entered to have dinner, and I met, next to me was the woman who actually was in charge of designing the doodles. And and for a second, I always desired I could design that doodle just for a month to see if I could change for a second the mind of someone just by changing that doodle. Independent if that was of Google or that, I knew how many people were always confronted with that. And I think here is always the difficult question that we have also as architects. How far are we willing to go to participate in specific structures to actually change some of the issues that as in society we want to shape and to address and to move. But this is why we invited you to come here as part of our experimental methods symposium and to actually see some of the experiments that Google is doing in relationship with cultural and different institutions. And to do that from an institution like the AA that started as a kind of alternative, a kind of in the edge, almost garage-like code writing, in this case, architectural education platform that now has become as well an institution that other individuals see and feel that it is a kind of established a force of good and evil in equal forms. And so I think that it's very interesting to identify what is the ethical and the ethos of an institution, and to make sure that we are constantly reminded in everything we do that actually there is something more important than the scale, the size, and the problematic issues that we constantly engage as we try to have larger audiences and a bigger impact. And ultimately, not to shy away from that, but to make sure that we are constantly reminding ourselves. And I think many of us reminded ourselves of that. And you also reminded us of what is that can happen when an institution is really trying to really bring us together in a different form. Thank you, Suhair.
Thank you.